hip hinge with obviously a flat back. I mean, the torso should always be organized. You should always have that flat back. Keep that tight back, but you get more lean forward, and it looks more like a sprint. So it's very much of a sprint, single leg sprint deadlift. So we do those. We do emphasizing the glute bridge, and also single leg Bulgarian deadlift holds for 5 minutes. We actually were holding that too. That's brutal. So that brought him up. And then mechanically learning how to do that skater position, like the skater lunges, skater squats.
Right.
Sometimes people call them, I guess, curtsy squats, but curtsy squats probably more with the back foot on the floor. I feel like the skater position is with the back leg crossed behind the front leg, lifted off the floor, right? Really working that position, making sure that he can hold that position for minutes on end with the knee aligned, and then being able to step into that position and pull down into the ground and then hold it fast, stick the position, and then transition out of it. So, yeah, we've been doing just a lot of getting the squat perfect, getting him to be able to absorb force on the way down, transfer it, and express it without losing any of it in any awkward breaks. And then we've been doing a lot of single leg work to make sure he's not tipping, twisting, or losing that expression. It was also becoming a limiting factor for us on his max speed work because he was generating so much power on his right leg that he would, every time he would hit with the right leg, he felt like he could just fly, and the left leg was giving him something, but it really was almost acting as a braking force because it was slower than the right. So it was like he wanted to go that next gear, but the one leg was holding him back. And as we brought the left leg up, oh my gosh, I mean, it's disgusting. And he keeps telling me these stories of he's down there practicing with the Scorpions right now, who's the NASL team down in San Antonio, another professional soccer league. And he's practicing with that team, and they were doing drills, and it was him surrounded by 4 guys. And so one front, one side, the other side, and one back. And he said, I did this move. He couldn't even explain it. He was like, my body did this thing, and I moved, and I was stepping in one direction, and I twisted the ball to the other, and this one guy lunged and missed. He was like, I beat all 4 guys and dumped the ball off. And I guess one of the other players on the team who played, he's more on like the downside of his career, like he's, I guess, in his early 30s, mid 30s, and he had played professionally in France, in the French leagues, and was a really high level European player. And he comes up to him and he's like, what the hell was that? And it's really cool because I don't teach him anything about how to use his feet to kick a ball or skills, right? I mean, it's not about changing the way that he kicks a ball. It's about changing the way he uses the body so he can choose how he wants to kick the ball. And so it's been a real cool journey just to see him evolve in the mastery of his own body. So that as a master of your body, you then have the ability to choose how you want your skill to be tweaked. You should be the one in control, right? You should be in the driver's seat, not the ball, not the body. You should be driving what's going on. So
that's really awesome. We talked about earlier at dinner. We're talking about being able to pull over that or clear up the screen that's in the way and access what's already there. I really like that metaphor, and I was wondering if you could touch on what are we accessing exactly. And we talked about it, but I thought you could tell the audience what the access was. What are we actually accessing physiologically, metabolically, all that fun stuff?
Yeah, cool. So Sumer was asking me questions about one of his. So let's take this out of the athlete realm. So because a lot of times when we talk about athletes, we tend to disconnect that a competitive athlete is different than say a general fitness client who's looking to do well or lose some weight or just change their life in a positive way. But it's really all the same. I mean, getting that athlete to be um, balanced and well in himself will then help him to move up his whole entire expression of his skill, right? So for him, he's getting better to express skill in soccer. For someone else, they might be getting better to express, their body on the beach. I don't know, but they might be getting better just to express not having pain, not having click in their shoulder, not having slide in their knee. So you were asking me about one of your clients who seems to be having a shift in her patella, in her kneecap, and we were talking about just some of the things that could be creating that effect and how we could unpack that. And I think one of the biggest pet peeves I have in the industry in general is the health, wellness training, all of it is we have people seem to get married to one system and say they have a systems approach. And it has to be, unless last time I checked, you don't have a skeleton, and you don't have connective tissues, and you don't have muscles, and you don't have nerves, and you don't have water in your system, and you don't have joints, then sure, one system will work. You can go to a chiropractor, get your bones shifted, and you're strong as hell. But that's not everything. That's not the whole picture. And interestingly enough, this conversation it comes on the heels of one of our interns over at Cat's Sports Performance, who was asking me questions about how do you know what to start with when you get someone, and I kind of described it as really, well, what's your limiting factor? Because all systems have to be working in harmony so that it's not systems but really one whole. And are you clearing each system? Is the person's muscle tissue and the fascia, which is the connective wrapping, and I'll actually do a little lesson on that this week on smashing and fascia and whatnot. So kind of learning more about rolling, foam rolling, and massage and things like that. But if the muscle tissue is so stiff and just so locked up, then you're not going to be able to access anything else, right? I mean, it's kind of locking you down. But if let's say that's not the issue, let's say that your tissues are stiff because you haven't had any water. You might be dehydrated. I had a young athlete who we were rolling his traps on a lacrosse ball, and he was like, "Man, this hurts," and this is usually not the one that hurts. And I'm like, "Ding, ding," and I said, "Well, what's been up? Like, what'd you do last night?" He said, "Well, we were in the car for 7 hours because we wanted to go see this movie, but the movie theater was closed, and then my parents drove to this other town." And I was like, "So," he was like, "I'm exhausted. We were sitting in the car for 6 hours," and he's like, "I really haven't had much water." And I was like, "All right, so you're dehydrated and you've been sitting for 7 hours. Of course your tissues hurt." Like that kid, his limiting factor might really not even be his overall tissue quality, or like specific tissue quality in a certain area. It really is just he's not drinking enough water. I mean, your tissue quality is, and when I say quality, so that it's not like beef jerky, it's more like veal, right? It should be nice and pliable, but that's affected by hydration and by movement and by creating that opening by using pressure and stripping, massage techniques with a lacrosse ball or with someone's hands to open up that tissue to allow the water to come in. And so you have this one system that's very tissue based. Then you have another system that's more the harder, non-contractile, non-energy producing tissue of the tendons, the ligaments, the muscle sheaths, which is your fascia. All of it together is fascia. So it's just a fancy word that's thrown around that's really just saran wrapping and filling that connects everything. And then you have the bones, so it's all connected to the bones. And so how is your skeletal structure aligned? If you have scoliosis, which one of the girls I train does, it's going to be a very different ball game as to where I have her hold a bar in terms of spacing her grip out. I have to account for the fact that, okay, this is not a tissue problem. There's an actual bend in her spine. And although I can clear the tissues, I can get her feeling a lot better, I'm not doing her any favors by having her hold evenly and neutrally because now her body feels it as shifted to one side, even though she's gripping the bar evenly. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So I have to account for skeletal. Well, then what about the nervous system? The nervous system is really the master and the commander. It's everything. If it's not giving the right instructions, or if it's giving instructions that are getting fuzzy, that are not making it through the noise, if there's too much noise to reach its destination, um, you're not you're not really making the body do what you want it to. We were talking about how Bruce Lee is probably one of the um, more cool case studies that was done in science, where they brought him in and they did sort of electromyography, which is like EMG. Um, so EKG gives you like your heart rhythms, right? The electric signal in your heart. Well, EMG does the same in your muscles. And they were able to instruct him to, in a standing position, contract a muscle, and he was able to control it while the other pads stayed dormant. And he could change contraction over his body. So he had enough mind-body connection to control what muscle he could turn on.
Hmm.
And that's that just, upper level, highest expression. But that's essentially what a human body is capable of. And it's all really, everything is a song and dance to get to the nervous system, get it to do what you want. And then once it's doing what you want and you're in the right positions, it's just reinforcing them over. And the last system would be your joints, right? So how the juncture between the bones, and then how those surrounding capsules hold those junctures together. And you have to be. I always work from the nervous system perspective, and I think that's what makes my perspective a little unique. Is that if you have a very high quad dominance, meaning that like you go to do something, your quads automatically are what does the work when your hamstrings are supposed to be. There's really good work out there. If you go to PubMed or you go to Google and type in William Evan from Wisconsin, he does some really good work with hamstring activation and quad to ham ratio. And just looking at this whole problem, that just because you're doing something that you think is working the hamstrings, it doesn't necessarily mean it is. Just because you're in the position is an assumption that like, okay, they're in a hip hinge, an RDL, a Romanian deadlift, a butt back position that should be overly loading the hands, the glutes, and they're not turning on a glute bridge that's using the quads. Like, there are all these instances where you're doing an exercise that the exercise is not doing. So, sort of like, what's doing the work? Are you doing the work, or is the exercise doing the work? And if you're improperly balanced, the exercise is doing work to you in a way that you don't want, and you're not really engaging in it. And I think that's a huge part of. You went on a little bit of a musing rant, museful rant, mindful rant, as I like to call it, on people not being mindful in their movement, right? And I think that kind of gets to what I'm talking about here, is that mindfulness is so key, but that mindfulness is also tied to that feedback loop. Like, are you telling the body what you want it to do, and is it doing it, or is it doing something else? Or are you not even paying attention and it's doing whatever it wants?
I think it's really fascinating that we mentioned an example like Bruce Lee, who has such an amazing capacity, or had an amazing capacity to be able to engage whatever he wanted to engage on point. Like, whatever he wanted to turn on, it turned on. And he had that mind-body connection. And it's almost like each and every one of us, like Scott was talking about earlier, has this immense power to be able to access these deeper parts of our nervous system. And to me, it's a really empowering concept, and I feel like to most people it would be an empowering concept if you realize that we all have this immense capacity to really have control